The morning of my father's funeral reception, our housekeeper grabbed my wrist in the hallway and pulled me into the coat closet without saying a single word. Her name is Rosa. She has worked in our family home for 22 years. She folded my baby blankets. She drove me to the ER the night I broke my wrist at 14. She once sat outside my bedroom door for 3 hours when my first boyfriend shattered my heart, not saying anything, just being there in the particular way that only Rosa knew how to be. So, when she pulled me into that closet and pressed one finger to her lips, I didn't ask questions. I just listened. My name is Claire. I am 29 years old. I have a master's degree in real estate finance, and I have spent the last 4 years managing my father's property portfolio while he battled the illness that finally took him 11 days ago. I did not take a vacation in those 4 years. I did not attend my college roommate's wedding because lease renewals do not care about your personal calendar. I restructured 3 underperforming buildings, renegotiated vendor contracts that saved my father's company over $200,000 annually, and personally handled every tenant dispute, every emergency maintenance call, every bank conversation that my father was too sick to handle himself. I did all of this because he was my father, and I loved him, and that is what you do. I was standing in the coat closet of the house I grew up in, still wearing the black dress I'd had on since 6 that morning, when I heard my brother's voice coming from my father's study just down the hall. The door must have been cracked. Or maybe the walls in that old house were just thin enough for truth to travel through. My brother is older than me by 7 years. His name doesn't matter. What matters is what I heard him say, in the same casual tone he uses to order coffee. She's going to sign it Tuesday. She trusts Marcus completely. Marcus, my fiancé, the man I had been with for 3 years. The man who held my hand at the hospital in the final week and told me, "You don't have to be strong every second, I'm here." I felt Rosa's hand tighten around my wrist. "I know," said a woman's voice. "My sister-in-law." She added brightly, "She always does what he tells her." That's the thing about Claire. She works so hard and then hands the credit to whoever she thinks she loves. I stopped breathing for a moment. The coat closet smelled like cedar and my father's old wool overcoats. I pressed my back against the wall, and I did not move. My brother continued. "The portfolio transfers once she signs the estate consolidation document. Marcus already walked her through it last week. She thought it was a tax simplification. Tax simplification. 3 weeks ago, Marcus had sat across from me at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and a folder of documents. He spoke for 40 minutes about probate efficiency and consolidated asset structures. He was patient and clear and loving about it. He refilled my wine twice. I signed 6 pages. Because grief makes you stupid, and love makes you trusting. And I had been both of those things at once. I had not read past the summary page. There was a pause from the study. Then my sister-in-law said, "What about the Delancey Street building? The one she restructured?" My brother said, "It's all in the consolidated trust. Once the transfer clears Tuesday, she gets a flat payout. One time. Then she's out. Out. Like I was a contractor who had finished a job. Out of the portfolio I had rebuilt from the ground up. Out of the company I had kept alive while my father lay in a hospital bed counting his remaining months. Out of the inheritance that was supposed to be split equally, which I knew because my father had told me himself, sitting in his study 2 years ago with his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, looking at me with the particular tiredness of a man who knows time is running short. "You'll be taken care of, Claire Bear. I've made sure of it." The footsteps in the hallway told me people were moving. Rosa guided me silently out of the closet and back toward the kitchen. Her face was tight, and her eyes were bright with something that was not tears. It was fury. She said very quietly, "I heard them planning it last night." I came back for my phone charger, and the study light was on. I did not know who else to tell. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, "Thank you." I meant it in a way that I didn't have the words for yet. She squeezed my hand once. Then she went back to organizing the reception trays like nothing had happened. I spent the rest of that afternoon doing something I was very practiced at by then. I smiled. I accepted condolences. I made sure the food was warm and the guests had what they needed. I stood next to Marcus while he shook hands with my father's business contacts, and I watched him work the room, and I thought about how good he was at this. How comfortable. How at home. He put his arm around me at one point and said quietly into my ear, "You doing okay?" I said I was fine. My voice didn't shake even a little. He believed me. That was his first mistake. My father's study was empty by 8 that evening. I told Marcus I needed an early night and sent him home with a long hug and a kiss on the cheek. He left looking satisfied, content, like a man who believed everything was going according to plan. I went into the study and I closed the door and I sat down at my father's desk and I did not cry. I had cried for 11 days. I was done crying. I opened my laptop and I pulled up every document I had signed in the last month. It took me 40 minutes to find it. Page 4 of the Estate Consolidation Package, subsection 3C, buried in language about Transitional Administrative Authority. It transferred operational control of the full property portfolio to a newly formed trust. The trust's primary beneficiary was a holding company I did not recognize. It took me another 20 minutes to find that holding company registered in Delaware, incorporated 4 months ago, with my brother listed as managing director. 4 months ago. My father was still alive 4 months ago. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I opened a second window, and I started pulling vendor contracts. Here is what they forgot about me. I don't just manage properties. I build the architecture around them. Every major vendor relationship, every service contract, every maintenance agreement on those 12 buildings had been renegotiated when I took over 4 years ago. And because I had learned early that this industry runs on relationships more than paperwork, I had structured every single one of those contracts with a continuity clause. A clause that required written authorization from the original negotiating party, meaning me, before any ownership transfer could be recognized as valid by the service provider. I had not inserted that clause to protect myself from my own family. I had inserted it because I was good at my job, and I knew that properties change hands and vendors get caught in the middle. But intention doesn't change function. I also pulled up the lease agreements for the Delancey Street building, the one my sister-in-law had mentioned, the one I had spent 8 months restructuring, 4 commercial tenants, all on leases I had personally drafted and signed as authorized agent on behalf of the estate. Those leases had a clause too. Any change in authorized management contact required 30 days written notice and tenant acknowledgement. Without it, tenants had the right to withhold payment pending clarification of authority. No payment, no income, no valuation, no investor confidence. They hadn't stolen a portfolio, they had stolen a structure that only functioned because I was inside it. I did not sleep that night. By 4 a.m., I had documented everything. By 5 a.m., I had drafted 4 emails. I did not send them yet. I needed to see something first. Tuesday came. Marcus arrived at 10 in the morning with coffee and a warm smile and a thin folder under his arm. He sat across from me at that same kitchen table, and he said that the final step in the estate consolidation was just a formality. A release signature. It would allow the trust to begin operating efficiently. I looked at him for a long time. I thought about the man I had believed he was. I thought about the hospital room and the hand-holding and the careful way he had always made me feel like someone was standing beside me. I asked him one question. Did you ever love me, or did you just need my signature? Something shifted in his face. Not guilt exactly. Something more practical. Recalculation. He said, "Claire, let's not make this complicated." That was my answer. I stood up. I told him the signing wasn't happening. I told him that the consolidation document he had walked me through was fraudulent in its material omissions, and that I had already been in contact with an estate attorney. I told him calmly and without raising my voice that if my brother's holding company attempted to act on the signatures already collected, I would be filing for a formal probate review. Marcus went still. Then he said I was grieving and not thinking clearly. I said I had never thought more clearly in my life. He left without the folder. I waited exactly 1 hour. Then I sent the emails. The first went to the primary maintenance contractor for all 12 buildings. I informed them that an unauthorized transfer of operational management was being attempted, that my authorization was required under contract before any new management contact could be recognized, and that until further notice. All service coordination should route through me only. The second went to the 4 commercial tenants at Delancey Street. A professional and courteous note explaining that a management transition was under review and that they should hold any payment disbursements until written clarification of authorized management was provided and acknowledged, per their lease terms. The third went to the bank holding the operating accounts for the property portfolio. I was still the authorized signatory on those accounts. The consolidation document transferred ownership but had not yet processed a signatory change. I flagged a formal review request, citing documentation inconsistencies, and asked that all disbursements above $10,000 be held pending review. The fourth email I sent to the one investor my brother had been courting for the past 2 months for a development deal on the Westfield property. I had met him once at a dinner. I introduced myself as the person who had managed that portfolio for 4 years, mentioned that I was aware a partnership proposal had been made, and noted that given current questions around the estate's administrative structure, I wanted to ensure he had full visibility before any commitments were made. I hit send on all 4 at 11:47 a.m. By 1:15 p.m., the contractor had replied, asking for clarification on management authority. By 2 p.m., 2 of the Delancey Street tenants had responded, saying they would hold payments as advised. By 2:41 p.m., my brother called my cell phone. I let it ring. By 3:10 p.m., Marcus texted, "What did you do?" Then 30 seconds later, "Claire, answer me." Then a minute after that, "You are making this so much worse." By 4 p.m., the investor emailed my brother asking to reschedule their Thursday call pending, as he put it, structural clarity on the portfolio. By 4:22 p.m., my sister-in-law called from what I assumed was her car because there was road noise, and she sounded like she was driving somewhere fast and was not happy about it. I did not answer that one either. My brother arrived at the house at 5:30. He didn't knock. He used the key he still had from when my father was alive. He walked into the kitchen where I was sitting with a cup of tea and a legal pad, and he stood there for a moment looking at me like I was someone he didn't entirely recognize. He said, "You are blowing up our father's legacy over hurt feelings." I looked at him over my mug. I said, "Tell me the name of the holding company you incorporated 4 months before our father died." Silence. I said it again. "Tell me the name of the company. Tell me when you incorporated it. Tell me when you brought Marcus into this plan, and then explain to me which part of that is our father's legacy." His jaw tightened. He said, "You were always going to be taken care of. The flat payout was fair." I said, "I managed that portfolio for 4 years. I increased its net value by 31%. I did that while flying home every other weekend to sit with our father. The flat payout you had in mind was 11% of current valuation. I know because I found the internal projection your attorney drafted." He looked like he'd been hit with something cold. I continued, "I am not going to fight you in public. I am not interested in destroying our father's name in a courtroom. But I need you to understand something clearly. Every operational relationship in that portfolio runs through me. Every vendor, every commercial tenant at Delancey, every bank flag I've raised is legitimate and documented. The investor is already pausing. And I have not yet spoken to the other 3 investors your holding company has been approaching." He sat down, slowly, like the air had gone out of him. I said, "I want a proper settlement. Fair valuation. My share of the portfolio calculated against 4 years of active management contribution, not just inheritance percentage. And I want it handled by a neutral mediator, not your attorney or Marcus." He said, "This will take months." I said, "I've been patient for 4 years. I can be patient for a few more weeks." He left without saying anything else. But he left without the fight he'd come for. And that told me everything I needed to know about who actually held the leverage in that room. The formal mediation was scheduled for 2.5 weeks later. Neutral office. Glass conference room. My attorney beside me. My brother and his attorney across the table. Marcus was not present. He had removed himself from the situation the morning after I turned down the signing, which told me the arrangement between him and my brother had conditions I hadn't fully mapped yet, and also told me that his investment in me had always been contingent on my usefulness. I did not let myself feel that until much later. In that room, I was just a woman with a legal pad and 4 years of receipts. My brother's attorney presented a revised offer, 30% above the original flat payout, still significantly below what I was owed. I slid a single document across the table. It was a management contribution assessment. 4 years of documented activity, signed off by an independent real estate auditor I had hired the week before. Rent revenue recovered, vacancy rates reduced, vendor savings per year, net value increase on each property attributed to active management decisions. It also included a timeline of the holding company's incorporation date relative to my father's diagnosis. I had not accused anyone of anything in writing. I had simply included it as context. My brother's attorney read it. Then he passed it to my brother. My brother read it and set it down and stared at the table. I said, "I'm not here to reclaim operational control. I'm here to exit cleanly with what I'm actually owed. Approve the revised settlement by Friday or the probate review moves forward and everything I've documented becomes part of a formal court record." The room was very quiet. My brother looked at me across the table. For a moment, he looked less like my opponent and more like my brother, which was in some ways harder to look at. I thought about the summers we spent at that house when we were kids. I thought about how my father used to say we were two halves of his heart. I thought about how 4 months before my father died, my brother had quietly incorporated a company designed to absorb what my father wanted to leave me. I looked back at him steadily, and I did not look away. The settlement funds cleared the following Thursday. I resigned from the portfolio management formally. In writing, with 30 days transition documentation for every property. Clean handover, professional. No sabotage. No burned bridges with tenants or vendors. I did my job until the last day because that is who I am, and they never understood that about me. They thought my reliability was a weakness. It was actually just evidence that I was better at this than they were. Investors reframed the narrative on their own. 2 of the 3 my brother had been courting reached back out to me directly after the news circulated in the way that professional circles circulate things. Quietly and thoroughly. I had 3 conversations and 2 preliminary meetings within the following month. Marcus texted me once after it was over. Just 2 words. "I'm sorry." I read it and I set my phone down and I poured myself a glass of water and I stood at my kitchen window for a while. I thought about whether sorry covered any of it. I decided it didn't, but I also decided I didn't need it to. I needed clarity more than I needed apology. And I'd gotten that the moment he didn't answer my question at the kitchen table. I didn't reply. My sister-in-law sent a longer message. She said I had turned a family matter into a financial war. She said I had done damage that couldn't be undone. She said she hoped I was satisfied. I read it twice, and I noticed she hadn't said sorry and hadn't acknowledged what they had planned to do to me, only what I had done in response. I noticed that she framed the damage as mine and not the result of a scheme that predated my father's death. I noticed she used the word family in the way people use it when they want obligation without accountability. I did not reply to that one either. There is one more thing I need to tell you, because it matters more to me than the settlement and the documents and the investor calls. The morning after the Mediaton funds cleared, I drove to Rosa's apartment. She lives about 20 minutes from my father's house, in a quiet neighborhood she's lived in for 30 years. I had called ahead, so she wasn't surprised. But she still met me at the door with her reading glasses on and a dish towel over her shoulder because she had been in the middle of something. I handed her an envelope. Inside was a check that represented a portion of the settlement, an amount I had decided on during those early morning hours when I was mapping everything out, and I had written her name down on the legal pad and circled it. Not as a calculation. As a reminder. She looked at it, and then she looked at me, and she said, "Claire, this is too much." I said, "It isn't enough. And we both know it." She pressed her lips together in the particular way Rosa has when she is trying not to cry and is mostly succeeding. She said, "Your father would have been proud of you." I said, "I know." Then she made me tea and we sat at her small kitchen table for an hour and she told me stories about my father from years before I was old enough to remember them, and I listened to every single word. People ask me sometimes, mostly the ones who know pieces of the story, whether I regret how it unfolded, whether I wish I had confronted my brother sooner, whether I wish I had read the documents more carefully before I signed them. I don't think regret is the right word for any of it. What I have instead is clarity about the kind of people who wait until someone is at their most exhausted and most devastated and most willing to believe in the people they love, and then move. I have clarity about the difference between someone who stands beside you because they love you and someone who positions themselves beside you because you are useful. The distinction is invisible until you are no longer useful, and then it becomes the only thing you can see. I also have clarity about Rosa, who walked back into that coat closet in her head 100 times before she grabbed my wrist in that hallway, and who decided that I mattered enough to risk the awkwardness and the uncertainty and the possibility that she had misunderstood. She did not misunderstand. The property I walk into every morning now is my own. I signed the lease 2 months after the settlement cleared, a small commercial suite with good light and a view of the street. My name is on the door. Not my father's company name. Not a trust, mine. I have 2 ongoing consulting contracts and a 3rd in negotiation. I have a meeting next week with one of the investors my brother had been courting who reached out to me specifically, which I note without satisfaction and with only a quiet appreciation for the fact that competence does not stay invisible forever, no matter how hard certain people try to bury it. I don't fund other people's empires anymore. I don't sign documents I haven't read in full. I don't confuse someone's calmness in a crisis with trustworthiness, because some people are calm in a crisis because they created it. And I don't mistake someone staying quiet under pressure for someone who has nothing to say. The morning my brother thought he had everything arranged, I was in a coat closet listening to my own name being used as a strategy. They thought they were erasing me. They were just showing me exactly where I stood, which turned out to be exactly where I needed to be standing to see everything clearly. I saw it. All of it. And then I got to work.